There's an aspect of personal development that I don't think is talked about enough. It's something that can be challenging and adds an extra dimension to our work to change our lives. Often when we think about, working on ourselves, we think about becoming more focused, having better boundaries, maybe learning to meditate or get in touch with our emotions, become more embodied. And we think of this as something that we do for ourselves, that it's a personal journey. We might even think of it as a hero's journey, something that we are doing to change our lives. But we live in community and relationships with others. And when we change significantly, our relationships change. And this can be something that can be surprising, and it adds and can complicate things. We need to learn to navigate a new level of relating to others that could be completely new territory for us. If we think about something about becoming confident, this seems like a pretty kind of straightforward, positive thing. You want to become more confident so you can make use of new opportunities, meet new people, maybe take that promotion at work. But if you're somebody who's kind of been more reserved, maybe somebody who goes along to get along, and all of a sudden you start to be more assertive, this is going to change the dynamic of people you're with. Maybe at work you were somebody who was more quiet and more of a wallflower, and now you state your opinion. Other people who saw you as easygoing might now see you as competition. You might now actually get a level of conflict that you've never experienced before in your life because you've been easygoing. But now that you assert yourself more, you also have to deal with a new level of relationship that could be, something you've never had to learn before. One aspect this can be, and I did a video on how to say no, because learning to say no is an important part of personal agency. It's a skill, and it's a skill some people need to learn because, many people have learned to be nice. They've learned that, saying no invites conflict and it feels unsafe. But if we want to direct our lives more for ourselves, we have to develop that ability to say no. And if you're somebody who's never really done that much and you start to do this, this will change your relationships. It might change your relationships with your significant other. Maybe you're somebody who's, gone along with their suggestions and all of a sudden you're more saying, no, I don't want to do that. Then you have a new level of territory to navigate. And this happens across the board with your friends, with work. If you have a boss who's used to you, working overtime whenever they ask, and all of a sudden you say, no, I have to go to my daughter's play, then that changes your relationship with them. And this is an extra level of work that people might not be prepared for, expect, and it's something new to figure out, so that we have to learn to incorporate. And just to go with one more example of this, if you're somebody who's getting more in touch with how you really feel, with your emotions, especially if it's something like you're somebody who's never really been in touch with your anger, never expressed your anger, and you start to do that, this can be surprising to the people around you. And chances are, if you've never been somebody who's, expressed anger, expressed that kind of forceful assertion of your boundaries, chances are you have friends who like that you're a soft person. And if you all of a sudden have that more edge, that might be uncomfortable for them. And it might, you could actually lose friends as you start to develop and become more in touch with your emotions. And it might not just be anger. It could be if you're somebody who becomes more in touch with your sadness, that could be uncomfortable for the people around you that aren't used to that. Maybe they're used to you being a steady person. So another thing is when we live in community, sometimes it can be hard to change because the whole community is staying the same. And sometimes this actually can hold us back, or we might find that we have to leave community. And this happens especially in terms around religion and politics, which are pretty strong situations, especially in our modern era. If you start to shift your political views, chances are you're going to lose some friends. Or if you start to, see your faith in a different way, that can be very challenging because all the people believe a certain thing. And if you start to believe something differently, you risk losing friendships over time. And this could happen in another way, not just religion and politics, but say if you're going from somebody who's been a regular drinker, your way of socializing is to go to the pub and watch sports or play pool. If you decide not to drink, you're going to lose a whole level of friends. And you might get flack for it. People might go, oh, you think you're better than us. You might have to deal with an extra level of interaction. You think you're just working at, you're going to the gym now, or you're taking extra courses and you're not drinking. There's this other level of how it affects you socially and your community that you might not be prepared for. It's something that you have to learn to navigate. One place this is especially important is within the family. I mean, family psychology is a whole big field, but within family dynamics, people can fall into roles, and some of these roles were formed in childhood. Often there's kind of the black sheep, or there's somebody that's scapegoat, that's, you know, is the one that expresses emotional energy that nobody else is. Just as there's somebody who kind of might be the good son or the good daughter, keeps it together. For people there to start to change can be very difficult. People still see you in the old roles, and it can be hard to break out of them. There's been many a person that's gone on meditation retreats or done psychological work, and they're feeling really like they've changed their lives. And then they go home for Christmas, and then they find themselves just snapped back into old patterns, because the whole matrix of the family, how people relating to them, is very hard to shift. And sometimes this is something that's, we all have to figure out in our own way. But sometimes we have to take a step back from relationships to change and then meet them in a new way. So this is a big subject. I just wanted to touch on this briefly in this video today, but it's something that I think is important. And in my own life, I've realized, like, you change yourself, and it's been surprising sometimes how that's affected relationships in ways I hadn't expected. To give you one example, about 25 years ago, whatever, I taught a couple meditation courses at a yoga studio. And in the first course I taught, only 6 people showed up. And we had a good little intimate group. And there's one man especially who, I'd have great conversations with and stay later and have tea. And then I ran the course again, and this time 25 people showed up. And then this same man came, and then he looked at me and he looked at all the people, and he said something like, "Oh, you're a big shot now," and his attitude towards me had changed. I hadn't changed in that situation, but the level of success of the course had, and now he no longer related to me the same way. I now became an authority figure, and he no longer felt the same rapport that he had in the small intimate group. This was something I wasn't expecting. And, these things can catch us off guard. I had an embodiment teacher who said, if you shift your financial situation, and there's a lot of talk about, your money mindset or becoming more successful, but he says, if you upscale your level of finances, you're going to lose about a third of your friends. And I was kind of shocked when he said this, but on reflection, I realized, there's some truth to that, just as you'll gain new friends. And this can happen in all sorts of different aspects. If you quit drinking, if you become more emotionally regulated, if you become more confident, learn to expect that there's going to be ramifications in your relationships. And this is a new territory that you're going to have to navigate. And it adds an extra dimension to our work on ourselves that, as I said, I don't think it's talked about enough, but it's very important because sometimes it can hold us back or be disruptive. And it's something that we have to learn to do in a skillful way. So on that note, as a plug, I am an embodiment coach trained in focusing and parts work. And if you find you're going through a time in life where you're making changes and you are dealing with these extra situations of how it's affecting your relationships or difficulty in presenting yourself in new ways, check out my website and book a free discovery call just so we can meet each other and talk about it. Other than that, I hope you found this video useful, something to think about that maybe you hadn't, or in a new way. And if you have, please hit like or subscribe. And thank you. And may you continue on your personal journey and, see it as a positive way of how you can notice your relationships change, because that's often how we know that we've changed ourselves. We often realize that we're different because we notice that people are relating to us in a new way. And I've painted this in a way of challenge, but there's a lot of positive aspects to this as well. All right. Thank you.